What is going on, you guys? Today's video, we're switching gears. We're going to talk a little bit about real estate. I actually had a comment in from one of our old-time students asking, say, it'd be interesting to do an update on my experience, now that we've purchased a couple properties. And I want to share with you guys exactly that. As a 27-year-old who is now 3 years into home ownership here in Vancouver, what is this all about? And I'm by no means an expert. You guys know that. I'm really learning as I go, and I want to share some insights. I found that real estate is not all rainbows and sunshine like they make it out to be. From the outside looking in, it's like you got to be in real estate. It's this holy grail of investment, of asset. You got to be in real estate. I found the process to be quite tedious, quite costly. It is more time consuming than you'd like, especially when you have a tenant in. And we're going to talk about bad tenants, which I do have an experience with that in the past. But nevertheless, it does come with its rewards, no doubt. And I guess that's the trade-off. But yeah, let's get into the video today. As a brief background, for those maybe not too familiar with my situation, last year, pretty much during the peak of the housing, little boom there, like literally at the peak, if I had to pinpoint, we purchased our townhome. And this is what we consider our family home. We ended up paying a grand total of $1.3 million for that home. And that's just the price of a lot of the places you'll find here in Richmond is where I'm from, FYI. Not Vancouver, just south of Vancouver, but a very sought after city as well. More expensive, very nice, very safe, very clean. A lot of wealth in this area. Happens to be a very big Asian population, that's just the way it is. That house has certainly gone down in value since we've purchased it, and we're gonna talk about that later. We do also have a condo, which I have a tenant in right now, and that one we got for $500K flat. And this was right during COVID. And what's really cool about my experience thus far, which I wanna start this video off with, is within just a short few years, I got to experience the buying process in both an optimal market for me, and then a not so optimal market for a buyer. In fact, I found them to be very, very polar different, and they came with two extremely different experiences. When we purchased the condo, this was right back in 2020 when COVID was kind of in the swing of things. And a lot of people at the time, we didn't have as much information as we did now on the severity of this and how long things were gonna last. And I believe there were lockdowns at the time, so we're wearing our mask when we go in these viewings and showings. It was right in the swing of COVID. I think that panicked a lot of people. And like stock market, very similar, comparable, these emotions just very much remain true. And for whatever reason, the seller wanted to get out of their property, and we ended up getting we came in under listing. So I recall this property being listed out $515, $525, something along that lines for a one-bedroom den in Richmond. We ended up putting the offer in pretty much. I remember there's a bit of negotiation, and we went in a little bit lower. Long story short, we ended up getting the deal at $500K. Nevertheless, it turned out well. I just saw a couple months ago a unit in this exact same area went, like the exact same, apartment unit went for 600 plus K. It probably has come down now given the state of the market, but nevertheless, I'm very happy with that price we paid there. What's crazy is that literally a year or so later, like not much longer, 2021, 2022, I forget what it was a completely different buying environment. Like completely different. If we want to consider that like a little pocket of a buyer's market where we had this opportunity, we had leverage to come in under ask and that type of thing. This next property was a gong show. And after a couple of failed offers that we had put out on different properties, which I actually documented, by the way, on the second channel. A lot of you guys don't know we have a second channel, but I actually documented this, and you guys found it really interesting to just share as I was going along. We had found a place for like 1.285 mil. 1.23, excuse me, is what it was, just recalling back to the video. And we did our tours, we crunched our numbers, and we're like, this is awesome, this is the one. And we go ahead and put our offer in. We ended up coming in 30K over asking, so above their listed price. No subjects, meaning that we had no subject to inspection, no subject to financing, essentially trying to come in with like the cleanest deal where it's just like, hey, they're looking at it, they're like, yes or no. Long story short, you can go watch that video, but that home ended up selling for 120K over asking. So we thought we were doing, we thought we were coming in with a good offer, 30K over what they're asking. Well, There ended up being 10 offers on that property, many of them subject free. And I remember the real estate agent even saying like, hey, it may not even be worth countering, if you're not really willing to move up, because there was just that much demand. Again, in only a years or so after purchasing that first place. Case in point being is that the landscape in which you're buying really makes a difference, and the emotions that are at play, and it totally changes the buying experience. And it's not that fun purchasing a home during a very hot market, because especially when you're younger and you may have your budget, like you go to your mortgage broker and they say, hey, this is what you can afford, or this is your top of budget. You feel kind of like, it does feel very hopeless when you're getting outbid by other people, in many cases who may have a lot more money than you. And again, you're kind of set on this ceiling or cap. And you do all this work going to check out the properties, and then you start to fall in love with it. Like as you're going through the tour, you're like, oh, this is where this can go, and this can go. And then you and your partner, whoever it is, starts getting really excited. And then, hey, it's not even close. Cool to experience that. Our condo that we ended up buying, I'll just share a quick little story. We ended up winning the bid, obviously. That's where we live now. But we were not the highest offer. Essentially, it came down to about three or so offers that they kind of had on the table, all subject free. So we didn't do the inspection, we didn't do anything. We ended up getting the place because we had written a handwritten letter, and this was instructed by our real estate broker, or our agent, who's very, very experienced, and I'm really glad we went with this guy. Very important to have a good agent on your side, because what I've come to learn is that the real estate game is very much like, it's not strictly mathematical. It's not strictly here, sign this paper, check this, da 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 da. It very much is a relationship game. It very much is a communication game. It's kind of like a dance. Like there's kind of an art to it where these are real people involved that are selling the homes, whether it's the seller or their agent. The personal connections go a long way. And anywho, after we'd lost a couple homes, we had to really pull out all the stops, and Viv and I ended up handwriting a letter with our agent, and we put a little photo in there saying, hey, we had a baby on the way, we have our pets, da da da, this is the perfect home for us. Kind of a little sob story. And it turns out that, the owner of the home had 2 kids, and their kids were going through, 2 older kids. And he remembers the struggle they went through to find a home, however many years ago it was. And case in point being was that he resonated with our story, that little handwritten note, to the point where they went with our offer, even though it wasn't the actual highest in terms of dollar value, which was really, really cool. So that was a lesson that, worked really well for us. You are dealing with real people. We didn't talk to the seller. This is just verbalized through the agents, but they felt that we would have been a good fit for their home. That was important to them. And had we not written that letter, I guarantee we wouldn't have got the place. So that was really cool. But nevertheless, 2 very different experiences in 2 very different markets. Definitely not as fun buying when there's so much demand and so much excitement for homes, because that really can be stressful. Let's move on now to the costs, because as I mentioned, real estate is a very costly endeavor. The obvious one that you're gonna have to save up for, and you will hear about, is the down payment. And we put 20% down on both of our homes. To me, that's pretty standard. I know there are cases where you can put less, from what I understand. But to me, I just look at 20% down. That's just the basic. If you want to get a typical mortgage with the right type of insurance, yada yada yada, 20% down is what you save up to, and that may take time getting there, but that's a big chunk, depending on the value of home that you're buying. Beyond that, of course, you have all these other fees and costs that come up. One thing you don't want to do is, in your bank account, let's say you have $100K, in a savings account or whatever, and thinking that $100K is what you can afford on the down payment. It's far from that. You need to leave buffer for all of these miscellaneous costs. The notary fees, which is obvious. There's a lot of legal documents you have to sign when you go buy a home, like literally a stack of them that you just go ding, 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 ding. And that will run you anywhere between $1 to $2K. You have property taxes, which you'll have to pay at the end of the year. Those can range depending on the home, which is, and these are not like at the time of sale, but these are things that you probably want to consider in the first year. I think my property tax is anywhere between $1 to $2K on the smaller property, and then on the townhouse, it'll be a few $1,000s. Just tax. You go down to the city hall or whatever it is, and you give them money. You got to do that every year. The condo fees. This is something that we deal with because, we live in both like a strata run units for both of them, and these condo fees will eat you alive. And what's crazy about them is they just keep going up and up every year. And I don't think as a owner in the building you have much say. Yeah, you can go to their little board meetings and you can kind of say this or that, but from what I understand, especially amongst these apartment buildings, because the insurance is so hard to get for the building wide insurance, nobody wants to insure these buildings for whatever reason. Those have just been jacked up and skyrocketed, and that does all pass through to you as a homeowner. Off the top of my head, I think we pay $300, $400, $500 a month in strata fees. That's just how it is. And those have ticked up from when we bought them. They start at like $300, and then next year they increase it 18%. And then next thing you know, you're paying a few $100 in these fees that are pretty much non-negotiable. The strata fees are the things that you pay for your garbage disposal and for them to kind of mow your lawns or the community lawns, those types of things. But nevertheless, that is a cost. Insurance is one of the little things that you have to buy. These are not expensive, but you go to Square One or whatever it is and get a little policy. Maintenance is one. You hear about it so much, right? You hear about like, oh, maintenance. You don't think it's a thing. At least me. That's just me being foolish. You hear people talking about it. It never really hits home until it's your place. Then you have to do maintenance, or your tenants are fudging something up. You guys know my story. I did a video on it. My tenant flooded my apartment. Flooded it. Like there was literally, water all over the place. What a goofball. And luckily I had the insurance. They basically paid, all I had to do was pay the premium, which was $1,000 or $1,500, whatever it was. Or not the premium, excuse me, the the word I'm looking for. Nevertheless, we ended up getting a whole new set of flooring in, which looks super nice and spick and span now. But there was a cost, of course, and a process. Like that takes time, arranging with your tenant to find a place to stay while they do that, because they didn't move necessarily fast from my experience. It took longer than I would have anticipated, but nevertheless, like stuff like that does happen. Even the little things when I say maintenance, like, just this year we got a new tenant in, and obviously got to get the place ready for him. And that requires, new light bulbs, which sounds like a little thing, but you spend $15, $20, $30, $50 on lights. Little things like getting cleaners in. We obviously need the place to be professionally cleaned, and yeah, I can go scrub it myself, but I opted to use actually a subscriber. One of the subscribers I bumped into around here had a cleaning service, and we exchanged numbers and whatnot, and he ended up doing it for us. But stuff like that does have a cost, right? And then even just one thing I have noted here, which is so minor, but these are things to consider. Moving costs, like the actual cost of moving in and out. Moving is just a hassle. It's whether you're doing a U-Haul, that costs money, whether you're hiring a moving company, even these silly things like going in and, renting the elevator. Like you have to rent the elevator for a day. And often, if you do it on a weekend, you have to hire a security guard, which is an extra $100, $200, a lot of little costs that come up. Nevertheless, it's like these things are just things that you have to worry about. We haven't even talked about the mortgages yet. And the mortgage, of course, this is the big cash flow drag. When you're going out and putting 20% down on a home, that other 80% is loaned to you. It's via the bank. And from my experience, I actually started off my journey with what's called a B lender, okay? So from my understanding, you have your A lenders, which are your kind of top of the line. You're gonna get the best rates, the most trusted and quality banks out there, TD, Royal Bank, Scotiabank, whatever it is. They're A lenders. Well, if you don't necessarily qualify for the A lenders, which are very, very strict in what they look at, they really like to look at your history, and of course it makes sense. They want to make sure they're issuing their loans to the top of the best loanees out there. Well, I didn't quite qualify that early on in my business life. Our business, which is separate from my personal income, was doing well and making lots and lots of money. But me, on the other hand, like Brandon's income wasn't quite there yet. It wasn't quite as high, and they wouldn't look at the business income, even though it's my business, as there wasn't enough history there, right? I think you need at least 2 years or whatever it is, and my personal income certainly came below the threshold that they were willing to loan out to. Anywho, we went to a B lender. We went through Equitable Bank, which again, you guys might have seen in the past video. I talked about that. I'll give a little snippet. Equitable Bank was the first B lender that I went to, and a B lender, they'll lend you the money, same as same as always. It'll be very similar terms, very similar deal length, 5-year this or a fixed mortgage, variable, whatever it is. They do come in at a higher interest rate. So that's kind of the trade-off, is that, hey, they may bypass the 2 years of employment income. Maybe they can use your business, recent income statements, those types of things. But you do pay a higher interest rate. So that was the trade-off that we did. It ended up working just fine, because what we did was we just used the B lender as kind of that transitionary mortgage till we had the history. Now, if you were to look at my mortgages, they're with the big credible banks. So the banks that you'd bank with. Nevertheless, it was kind of a stepping stone that we saw made sense in our situation. To talk about numbers on mortgages, I don't want to give too much detail because there's a lot of weird people online that do like scammy stuff and whatnot. This is hilarious. I saw this last night, FYI. Like, what? This cracked me up. This on the screen that you're looking at is an ad that the scammers have run where they took my content over to TikTok. And, they're pretending to be me or whatever, trying to get people to send them Bitcoin. You guys know that. If you guys see any scams in the comment section down here, anyone trying to WhatsApp you or, get you to do any crypto, this, that, you guys know that's not me. You guys know to report that right away. But like, that's some next level stuff to make my hair green. Like, that is just ridiculous. That happened last night. Someone sent me that and I was just like, oh my goodness, that's goofy. But where was I? So anywho, yeah, I don't want to share direct numbers, but for rough ballpark, looking at, for example, my townhome, when we purchased the home, my monthly mortgage was in the range of $3,500, right? $3,500. And we did set it up on a variable mortgage. Both of my mortgages are on variable mortgages. We'll talk about that in a second. Long story short, we know how this past year has gone. Those have increased, and now I'm paying somewhere in the ballpark of $5,900 a month, strictly in mortgage costs, strictly month after month. I split it up bi-weekly, so I split it in two. But yeah, $5,900 as of today, which is a healthy chunk of money. That very, very fast, like, situations change, and that definitely takes a hit on your cash flow. Like, $5,900 is, for me, we are a business, we do all that. It's a good chunk, and it does eat out to a lot of other areas. Let's talk about the variable mortgages, right? So do I regret setting my mortgages up as variable? Of course I regret that. Like, I'd be lying to you to say, no, well, there's obviously hindsight's 2020, but if we look back, how did I look back from now to a year or so ago? Of course I would have rather done a fixed rate. When we started our mortgage, it was somewhere around 1.45. Like, that was the variable rate that we locked in, 1.45. Over the year, that has climbed to 4, 5, 6, I believe it is now. It is just, it's crazy. And up on the screen, I'll share with you some rough numbers just to share with you guys kind of how this breakdown looks. Again, not with giving too much detail, but what's really crazy is you just see the difference between principal and, interest, and how that ratio skews as the interest rate gets higher and higher and higher. It turned out that, and I was very frustrated to hear this, but with the bank that I was with, they had voluntarily, without asking me, decided that, Canadians are feeling a lot of struggle right now, and they made a bank-wide decision that rather than increasing my payment, okay, let me backtrack. From what I understand, there's two types of variable mortgages out there. There's one variable mortgage where, for example, let's assume you're paying $2,000 a month, right? And you have your allocation between interest and principal. As interest rates rise and as the cost of borrowing goes up, one of the mortgages is that your payments increase. So it'd go from $2,000 to $2,100, $2,500, whatever. It increases to keep that ratio to basically to keep you on a normal amortization period of whatever you set, 25 years. Understand? The other type of variable mortgage is that your payments stay the same, but it skews between principal and interest. You'd essentially be paying more and more interest till you hit the trigger rate, until you can't, if you're paying 100% interest, you will hit the trigger rate and then they're gonna make you up it. But those are, in my eyes, the two different types of mortgages. And I had one set up like this, the condo, and I had the townhouse set up where it was set to go up and up and up. Well, KEB, which is the bank that I'm with, which again, I don't know if that's a B lender or an A lender, technically, but that's, yeah. Anywho, they made a company-wide decision that I only found about after calling them and, talking to 3 different people and kind of grilling them on that and saying, why is it not increasing? Because if you literally look at how we signed our documents, that's what it was set out to do. They made a company-wide decision that because Canadians are struggling, we assumed that you would have rather not had your payments increased. So we ended up just skewing this so that you're just paying a crap ton of interest. And literally, it's like you're paying rent to the bank at that point, where of your $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, it's just covering the interest portion, and you're not paying down your mortgage anytime faster. I remember seeing with TD, like I looked at my amortization period. You go online and TD actually has some really good mortgage details and projections and all these types of little math assumptions you can make. And I looked and it said, basically my mortgage would be paid off in I think it was 150 years or something crazy like that. 150 year period at this rate. And I said, that's bogus. That's not what I want. Luckily, I did the math and understood that I can afford X and X amount. So I had them bump that up to now I'm on a normal amortization schedule. That's one thing I would suggest for anybody I wouldn't suggest that. I know a lot of people in my personal circle who are just happy with that for the time being while we kind of get through, however long this period lasts. But for me personally, I would prefer to keep that normal amortization schedule happening. But nevertheless, that's what happens. And what's fascinating, I did a video, if you guys remember, a little while back talking about should you invest or pay down your mortgage if you have extra money. And I ran a few projections and calculations at, the current interest rate, which was like probably sub 2 at the time. I ran one at, I believe, 3 or 4 or 5%. I even ran, I would say not a worst case scenario, but I ran the scenario of what if interest rates were up at 7%. And I'm pretty sure at the time I mentioned this is not what I anticipate, this is not what I foresee, but it is something that you have to budget for. And again, that was like a very big, from 1.2%, 1.5% mortgage to 7%, that did seem very far off, but I didn't want to count it out. And in fact, when I budgeted, I did exactly that. I actually have room for more. But very important is that, when times are good, especially when interest rates are low, you can't anticipate that's going to happen forever. And do I regret not just locking in a fixed rate? Of course, that would have been nice, but I do have to live with the decision that I made. And again, everything that I did was within budget. So although my mortgage payments go up right now, that just has to eat out of somewhere else. It has to eat out of some of my fund money or some of my, certainly, unfortunately, some of my investment money. Less money right now goes into stocks for me. They go into this asset, which is real estate, which at the end of the day does help get me to my goals, but I would still rather have more money in my stock portfolio. But hey, I want to quickly talk about finding a tenant and how that experience has been and went, and the learnings that I have gotten from that. And then talk about the benefits of home ownership, and then wrap this up, because I know I've been saying a lot of, it sounds like, oh, this sucks and everything. Yeah, there's things to consider, but at the end of the day, this isn't a bash on real estate. I'm just sharing with you guys my experience and all these things that you may have not have considered. There are still obviously the benefits to it as well. But finding a tenant, let me just start by saying this. When they say don't lease and rent to a friend, like a peer of yours, I understand why they say that now. And it's like age-old advice that you'll hear. It's wisdom that you'll hear everywhere. And it doesn't really hit home until it's happened to you. But yeah, I had a bit of a horror story just a couple months ago with my tenant, who was a high school buddy of mine, a friend. Played video games together. We played basketball together. Buddy. He was paying $1,500 a month, which right now the unit rents for $2,350. So $2,400, if you will. But yeah, $1,500 a month, which was a good deal. And it made sense at the time, and I was able to do that. He kept saying I'm going to raise throughout the year. Oh, I'm set for this new position. I'm going to interview here in the next quarter. I'm going to begin this new role so I can increase my... That never happened, obviously. Long story short, the year goes well, really well, flood aside, which is just a, honest mistake. That stuff happens. But he moves out, he's all happy, we're dapping each other up, hands over the keys, all is good. And then he ends up basically demanding, money from me. Like, he sends me a text and some screenshots of the thing online. You owe me X amount rent. Like, I have to pay him rent because he moved out, and he was sending me all this stuff. And he sends a text saying, I'm not here to argue or debate, but if you don't send the money within X amount of days, I'll be bringing this up with RTB, which is the residential tenancy branch that handles all these disputes and everything. And I'm like, what the heck? First of all, it really caught me off guard, like a bit of a low blow, because, hey, you had a pretty good place all year long, and I did my best to be a good landlord, and again, everything seemed to go well, but he was under the impression that he was owed some extra money, like a month or two rent, because he was asked to leave. And I totally thought that he was too. When I first got that, I'm like, oh crap, this is a whole learning for me. I owe this guy money. I ended up doing my research, due diligence, calling the RTB and, getting the whole story out. Turns out I owe him absolutely nothing. Like, I owe him zero. And there's a very misinterpreted page on the website that says, if you were asked to leave, you were entitled to 1 or 2 months rent. And this is true if a certain form is signed, and this is where it gets hilarious. There's a specific form that has to be issued. I have to issue him this form that says, I am requesting you leave this property within 2 months for my own personal use, whatever the case is. And we both have to sign it. And they asked me, did you issue that form? Is it signed? And I'm like, no, I didn't even know about this form. Like, this is the first I'm hearing about it. And they're like, okay, well then you don't owe him anything. I'm like, what do you mean? I'm like, it says here on the website that if I asked him to leave, which I did because I needed to find a new tenant at a better rate. And he said, well, if there's no form signed, he just voluntarily left. He voluntarily left and handed over his keys to the property. I guess typically what happens is these tenants will, they'll burrow in, and they'll be the, they'll be the one that is not wanting to leave, and that's really where the problem is they'll basically kind of dig their heels in the sand and say, I'm not moving. But what happened in our case was they said, your tenant's out of the property? I'm like, yeah, like I have the keys, like he's gone. And they're like, well, in theory, your tenant moved out and hasn't paid this month's rent. So there was no end of tenancy. Like there was no form that ended the tenancy. After a year, it technically trickled over to month, right? It goes 1 year term, then month to month. So they said, you don't have to do this. Like it's a pity thing to do. But in theory, I could dispute him because he had voluntarily left the property without really ending the tenancy. He gave me the keys, like it's basically a vacant house, but on paper, like if they were to go to, there's a little tenancy court, like it's a literal court thing where you provide your evidence and all this stuff. But if it were to go to court, in theory, he is on the title, it's gone to month, and he hasn't paid rent. So he hasn't paid this month's rent, he just chose not to be in the house, and it was just this huge, it was a real roller coaster. I went from being like, really caught off guard and like, what the heck? Like felt a little bit, undermined by the person, bit upset, fully expecting, okay, I got to pay this guy, to like the polar opposite happening and being like, this is the best news ever. Turns out I didn't end up wanting to be, pitiful and spiteful. And I didn't want to, at first I did, but then I'm just like, after sleeping on it a day or two, it's like, it is what it is. Didn't end up pursuing that or anything of that sort. Yeah, it was just funny how that turned out. Case in point being, what I learned was, do everything very officially, everything from the move-in, inspections and all of the forms, make sure everyone has that. And if you are going to be lending to friends, like when money comes in, I guess depends on the friend, but some people, when the money comes in the door, like that'll change things. And for me, like, it's not a money thing. I know people, it's easy to say, but it truly is not it was not a money thing. Oh, I had to pay him $1,500 worth of rent. It was like the principle of, bro, you gonna do me like this? That ended up going there. But nevertheless, that's my lesson there. Friendships can be ruined with a tenancy. Nevertheless, I did find a really good tenant in now who I'm very much like. Awesome guy, young guy. What's crazy is I posted this, just this last year, did everything myself, went to, Darwin helped me out, but Craigslist, Facebook Marketplace, made a couple postings. And within 48 hours, we got, I kid you not, like 40 to 50 inquiries about this property. And I guess that just goes to show how much demand there is for rent. And like I said, it's like renting for $2,400 for a 1-bedroom apartment. It's crazy how much they go for. But essentially, long story short is right now, those are at my costs for the mortgage, the strata, property tax kind of thing in there. But the way I see it is now I've got a tenant in there who's paying that place down on a normal amortization period, which is great. I just have to worry about my townhome. But yeah, that's kind of the situation. I guess in terms of benefits, what I would say is this. What I've been taught by investing in real estate is Obviously, like this one goes without saying, but you do get the advantage of leveraged returns, right? Leveraged returns meaning like, people are so against margin in the stock market. We never want to borrow money to invest. And I think that is very wise and, good advice for the most part. I mean, people tend to forget that when you buy real estate, which is an asset, 80% of what you own is leveraged. 80% is loaned from the bank. You're putting 20% down, but you're getting exposure to 100% of the asset. And assuming that grows well over time, which in a market that we live in, which is a desirable place to live, I would anticipate it to grow very much in line with probably the stock market. A lot of demand always for Richmond. Again, I say always, but who knows? Nevertheless, that's one thing that, yeah, in very few cases in life can you put 20% down on an investment and end up, owning the entire thing. You don't obviously own it, but you do partake in that growth over the next 10, 15, 20 years. I think what's been biggest for me is simply the forced savings nature of this. And like I said, it sucks that my, monthly costs are going up and up and up. Like, it sucks for the cash flow. But it is forcing me. There is no choice that I have to put money away. Would I be putting that much money towards my investments? Like, would I be putting $6,000 or $8,000 a month to my investments had I just had that? Probably not, to be completely honest with you. I definitely put money in, but would it be as much as it is? No, like that's just a simple fact of the matter. What real estate and owning a home forces you to do is you don't have a choice. Like, you have to pay your mortgage and you have to put money away every month and allocate that towards your mortgage payments, therefore, paying down your home. I think that is it's a really cool embedded benefit of owning home ownership, is that it forces you to save and it forces you to put money away. Again, it's not the same as the stock market in that you have all this liquid money that you can go and do what you want with, but you are putting money towards an asset. And of course, it's an asset that provides you a home and a shelter, right? I cannot live in my brokerage account. I cannot live in my Apple shares or my McDonald's shares. Like, those are stocks that are going to make me money, but it's not a physical asset like a home where, you can raise a family and you can, stay warm at night and park your car and all this stuff. So it does have its pros and cons. I think in summary for this video, again, I know it kind of came off as a gloomy thing. It's not meant to be gloomy, but I do just want you guys to understand, like, there are a lot of costs that you have to save up for. It is expensive. You need to have quite a bit saved up. And I think importantly, what I've learned over this past year is when you are budgeting, how much home you can afford and you look at your cash flow on a month by month basis, plan for the worst case scenario. Again, I'm grateful I did this. So it's really fascinating. If you go back and watch that video that I'm talking about, where I talk about paying down my home or this, like, I run the scenario up to a 7% interest rate. And there was a couple comments below saying like, oh, it's never going to get there. Da, da, da. It's like, it kind of did. And was I foreseeing that? Did I expect that? No. But did I factor that in? I did, in a worst case scenario. And now it could get worse, to be completely honest with you. I'm not saying this is the worst, but in such a fast time, the rates going up this fast, it is something to account for. And those are things that I would definitely, point you towards, is doing the math and really crunching that. One thing that I think helps a lot with the psychological aspect of being a homeowner is knowing that you are in a strong financial position. Like, let's just say something like job security, obviously savings, which you need to have. But I think if you have a really stable career in front of you, like you're in a position where you're not really at risk of getting your job cut, pay cuts, getting laid off, which we're seeing a lot of people now, even these, big tech firms all laying people off. You may think you have a good job, but understanding that you are in a secure place in your job can provide you a lot of peace of mind and mental security when it comes to this stuff. Because again, it definitely can hit hard. Like, it can be a very worrying and unsettling feeling when your mortgage rates are going up and maybe your income isn't going up to match that. Myself, for as long as I can remember, I've been, earning my own money. Like, I worked with my dad for a few years, which was great and lucky, and I'm blessed to do that. But when I branched off, everything was myself, and my earnings are very fluctuating. YouTube here, some months are good, some months are bad. It's scary being an entrepreneur, really, because you don't have that security, that fallback of, I got my salary and I can budget for this. And I know it's really the polar opposite. It has its pros and cons. You can also make a lot more. But case in point being is that I think having a really dialed in to your career and the security that offers, that can provide a lot of clarity. And yeah, don't go jumping in, don't be so excited to buy a home, especially if you're young and you're all over the place, if you don't have that security in place and if you're not in a position to. Because I can see now why so many people would find themselves in a pickle if they had bid on more than they could chew, if they bought more than they could, and now these rates are going up and maybe their job isn't, or they're losing work hours or whatever the case is, and then you got to go sell your home at a loss, like at a underwater, if you will, where your home value doesn't even recoup you. It would be a losing investment in that case. Don't do that. Don't want to own a home that much that you would put yourself in a situation like that. I think renting is very, very suitable for a lot of people. But yeah, that's kind of my thoughts on my experience for home ownership. Like I said, am I an expert at this? Absolutely not. I am learning as I go, and it's fun. It's a lot of work, but it is fun. It's all good life learning for me. And I know, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, I'll look back and when I have new tenants in this or that, it'll be second nature. But this first go around and getting all the forms ready and doing all this stuff, it's all new and it's all exciting. But yeah, just to say, it's not all rainbows and sunshine, but I do, I'm grateful that I'm in a position to be finding these things out and learning these things. Always possible because of you guys watching my videos and making it through to the end, for those of you that have. So if you guys appreciated my thoughts and enjoyed, give this video a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down below. I'm very curious to just hear all of your thoughts on this. Like anything that I said about this video, am I approaching it the wrong way? Have you experienced similar things? Do not hesitate to leave a comment down below. Of course, we have our Investing Academy. If you're in the market for training in the stock market, not so much real estate. In fact, we don't really talk about real estate at all. As you can clearly see, I don't know what I'm talking about, but that's that first link down below. As always, I thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next video.